Hi, I'm Martha Higdon from quiltingbymartha.com. I have my own long arm business and I've been quilting for other people for over 2 years now. And the major problem that I see is borders. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about adding your borders on your quilts correctly. I would love to do my magical wand and say that I can quilt out the wavy borders, but I just can't do that. On this quilt here that I just finished, it was a very large quilt, a king size with the border added and all but one little section. And as you can see here, I had to tuck it about maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, tucking it under and then doing a straight stitch on top of it. You can tell that she had mitered the corner, but I just had too much excess in there that I was not going to be able to quilt and lay out flat. After she puts the binding on it, you're probably not going to notice it as well. Every quilt that I get in through my business, I always press the backing and the top before I load it on my long arm machine. As I was pressing the quilt top on this quilt, I could tell right away that I was going to have some issues. As you can see, this ruffle effect, there was too much play and it would continue. If I tried to tuck, I'd have to tuck several throughout the whole quilt and it was just going to take away from the quilt and not give it that beautiful look that we're looking for. But as you can tell the ruffling, which does not lay flat. So again, I would not be able to quilt it out to make it look flat. So what we would have 3 choices we could do. This is the customer's quilt and she would have the 3 choices. Choice number 1 was that she could take it back, rip out the borders and add them on correctly, watching my other 2 videos on how to add borders to your quilts. Option number 2 is she can pay me to rip the quilts out and rip the border out and add it back on. Option number 3 would be just not to quilt it, and I think that would be a shame to go to all this trouble and not finish this quilt. So what she has decided to do is that she has me removing the borders and adding them on correctly. So that is what I done. I removed 2 sides of the border. And I could immediately tell that there was an issue right off the bat when I removed this border. You can tell that there's a wave to it and it does not lay straight. As you can see here, there's a wave in her cut. And it doesn't matter if you cut the straight of the grain or on the bias. Either way, you have to make sure that you are cutting your border straight. So here's what I did. I took the other border, I added my ruler on top, and I cut on both sides so that I would have a more even, a more straight line to add my border. And then when I add the border onto the quilt, it's very important that I pin throughout the border on the back side where the seams are going to hit. It's important that you pin as you go along so that when you sew your borders on, it helps keeping the border straight and in line. So I really encourage you to pin your borders on. The second issue I also saw on the quilt was, and maybe I didn't mention that in my other videos before you add your borders, you need to square up your quilt top. And what I mean by that, as you can tell, this is a king size quilt. It's going to cause major issues with the border. When you go to remove, or before you put your borders on, it's important that you square up your quilt. You can use up a square up ruler, and what you want to do is put the square up ruler square on the quilt. And what you're going to do is you're going to have to make sure that this is square on both sides. So I'm going to have to trim some of this down. And the reason for that, as you can see, if I have a little bit here and not so much here, it's going to cause an issue when I go to sew the border on. So 2 things that would really help when you're adding borders to your quilt is make sure that you are cutting your border strips straight, pinning them to the quilt, and then before you pin them to the quilt, make sure you're squaring up your quilt top before adding the borders. These 2 tips are going to help you to make sure that your quilts lay flat and that a long armer can quilt them the way they need to be. I really hope that this is beneficial for you and that you have learned to take a little extra time in squaring up your quilts and adding the borders on correctly. And I just hope that you continue to make quilts and add those borders. Thank you for watching this video. Look for more at quiltingbymartha.com.